Hey guys, I know a lot of you have been eagerly waiting for a new compilation of Scrabble phonies, and I'm thrilled to announce that as of today, the wait is officially over. In today's video, we're going to be looking at 10 of the most hilarious instances where people's names, which, mind you, are not valid in Scrabble unless they have a completely unrelated meaning, were played on a Scrabble board. And we're going to start with a game played between defending Scrabble Players champion Josh Sokol, as well as another very strong expert, Jack Peters. Let's start from the beginning of this game. It opens rather comically. Jack plays Gov for 14. Josh with this rack elects to dump his U and his T's and keep things tight with 2-2 for 4. Jack dumps the third U of the game in as many plays with Bug for 10, and Josh now has this rack. He's got DDEMNOS. And Josh bingos with Desmond hooking tutu to make tutus for 77 points. And this is just absolutely ridiculous, guys. Of course, Desmond Tutu, for those of you who don't know, is a very well-known and important figure in the movement to abolish apartheid in South Africa. So the fact that Josh played not only Desmond, but also hooked tutu to make tutus on this turn is just absolutely incredible. Now, tutus is of course a word. It's just a plural of tutu, which is a kind of skirt. Desmond is not a word. However, this would stay on the board. Jack did not challenge this off, and Josh indeed would go on to win this game a bit later. Our next example features top player Joey Malik. In this position, Joey's opponent Derek plays Seth for 25 points, making FAS and EME as overlaps. Now, both of the three-letter words that Derek formed as overlaps are valid, however, Seth is very much not valid. Now, Seth Lipkin is a longtime Scrabble expert who's well known for his major contributions to the game, in particular developing the site crosstables.com, which is a super valuable repository for tournaments as well as lots of other data. So major shout out to Seth if he's watching this video, and Joey did manage to find the silver lining in this play and give Seth a shout out in his comment, writing, "Mr. Lipkin would not be proud at seeing this stay on the board." However, if it's any consolation, Joey would go on to win this game quite handily, despite letting Seth stay on the board. Our next example, once again featuring Joey Malik, is taken from a game he played against Scrabble legend and two-time North American champion Joel Sherman. It's a pretty tight game, and in this position, Joey elects to play the word gump, hooking his G onto thin to make thing for a nice score of 44 points. However, there's a big problem. Gump might be Forrest's last name in the movies, but it is not an acceptable word in Scrabble, and Joel was very aware of this fact and promptly swatted it off the board, so instead of 44 points, Joey ended up with 0. So kind of ironic, given in the last game, Joey was on the receiving end of the phony 4, and he actually let it stay on the board with Seth. This time, Joey plays the phony 4, and he's not so lucky. It comes off the board. And this time, Joel would go on to win the game by a pretty significant margin after challenging off Gump. Speaking of phony 4s that have something to do with movies, we now have a position taken from a game played between Josh Sokol and longtime expert Jason Broersma. Josh has just bingoed with Induced for 88 to take a pretty substantial lead, and Jason's in some trouble. He's got presumably an overabundance of consonants, including a P as well as duplicate T's. And he elects to get rid of them by playing Pitt, P-I-T-T, for 19 points. And Josh did think about it for a little bit, but elected to let this stay on the board. It is not a word, and an actor by the name of Brad, kind of like Mr. Lipkin before, might not have been too proud had he known this stayed on the board. Our next position is taken from a game played between our two most recent Scrabble Players champions, Josh Sokol and Michael Fagan. Josh was first, and with an opening rack of AEELNOR, and being a big fan of the Roosevelts, opened with a bingo of Eleanor for 66 points. Actually, no, I'm kidding. Josh didn't open with a bingo of Eleanor because he knew that proper names are generally not valid in Scrabble. Instead, knowing that he didn't have a valid bingo here, he elected to change an O, scoring 0 points, but with a very potent leave of leaner, giving himself a great chance to hit a valid bingo on his next turn. Michael, on the other hand, didn't seem to get the memo about names generally not being valid, as he opened with Iggy for 18 points. Now, Iggy might be the first name of several famous singers. Iggy Azalea or Iggy Pop both come to mind, but Iggy is not valid in Scrabble. Josh promptly challenged this off the board. Now, the ironic thing is Josh, of all tiles, drew the Q on his one-tile exchange. So, of course, here he doesn't have a bingo, let alone even any valid play with the Q, so he would just trade one again, this time ditching his Q. But if we go back to the position where Michael played Iggy, it's possible if Josh drew something other than the Q, he might have actually purposefully let Iggy stay on the board if one of the tiles in Iggy gave him a bingo that he wouldn't have otherwise had. For instance, let's say Josh, instead of the Q, drew an F. Then there are no 7s in A, E, E, F, L, and R. However, the I in Iggy would have given him Flannery for 62 points. And as such, Josh would probably have intentionally let Iggy stay on the board, which would have been quite hilarious. But that's not what happened. Like I said, Josh drew the cue, challenged it off, and traded one. Our next example features David Weisberg, a strong expert who was the star of a video I once made on a crazy endgame he and I played in a tournament. Here his opponent, Flora, opened with Band for 24, David started with a bingo of Monetian, and with this position, Flora's best play is to play Avogadro for 94 points. However, that is not what Flora played. Instead, she played Avogadro for 65, and this phony stayed on the board. Now, some of you who are scientists are probably very familiar with Avogadro, but for those of you who are not, Amedeo Avogadro was an Italian scientist with significant contributions to the field of chemistry, and he's most known for Avogadro's number, which is the number of atoms in a mole. So, pretty funny stuff here. This stayed on the board, and David, despite letting this phony stay on the board, would go on to win this game. In fact, David would win this game by a single point after all was said and done, which I think is pretty ironic given that Avogadro's number is absolutely massive. Avogadro's number is greater than 10 to the 23rd, which, for those of you keeping track at home, is nearly 1 septillion, or, if this helps, it is 100,000 million. We now come to a game featuring the one and only Will Anderson, who many of you know as the 2017 North American Scrabble champion and YouTube Scrabble content creator extraordinaire. In this position, he's facing off against expert player George McCauley. It's worth mentioning, guys, this is a Collins game, so you're going to see some words like Arara, A-R-A-A-R-A, as well as Obo, O-B-O on this board that are not valid in the North American dictionary, so just keep that in mind. In this position, George has curb on his rack. I'm not sure what other tiles he had, but in any event, he has a nice play of Cuber for 25, which gets rid of these tiles, but he decides he wants to be a little bit greedy and score more points, which he does by playing Bruce for 44 points with Can. The only problem is Bruce is a name and not a word, and this is certainly not going to fly against the man, the myth, the legend, Will Anderson. Will challenges Bruce off the board, and George ends up with 0 points for his turn. Our next example features Joey Malik taking on another top player, Lloyd Mills. In this position, Joey's in a tough spot, down 56 points. We don't have his full rack, but we do know he's got 2 N's and a V, which is pretty difficult to work with, and there aren't a ton of places to bingo on this board. So Joey decides he needs to make as big a dent as possible in his lead, and he does that by playing Donovan from the D-O on the board, reaching the bottom left triple word score for 36 points, bringing himself to within 20 points of Lloyd. This looks like a nice play, however, there is a big problem, and you guys guessed it, Donovan is a name but not a word, and Lloyd was having none of it. This promptly came off the board, and instead of getting to within 20 points of Lloyd, Joey was set back and continued to be 56 points down, and no big surprise, Lloyd went on to win this game quite comfortably. Our next example once again features Joey Malik, however, this time he's on the receiving end of the phony as opposed to the playing end. His opponent here is none other than myself. This game was taken from our 10th Blitz battle, which is currently up on my channel. It was a great match, by the way. Be sure to check that out if you haven't already. But as for this position, I was up a little bit, so I wanted to try to play some defense and also score pretty well while unloading a bunch of my clunky tiles like my J and my K and my duplicate A's. So I did that what seemed very nicely by playing the word Jackie through the C in touch for 37 points, which Joey responded to by playing Drain with Ed for 24. Neither of us actually realized until the end of the game that Jackie is not a valid word. I completely thought it was good, as did Joey. However, Jackie's J-A-C-K-I-E-S and Jackie J-A-C-K-Y are valid, but it is not good as a 6 J-A-C-K-I-E. So Jackie Robinson probably would not have been very proud of this one, but what can you do? Hey, at least I got away with it. Our final example of this video, but certainly not the least funny, occurred in the game played between Doug Brockmeyer, a longtime top expert, and a mystery opponent. I unfortunately don't have full details of this game, so I know it was in a sanctioned tournament, but I don't know who Doug's opponent was. We're going to say that his opponent opened with Fibbed for 36 points. I don't actually know what the opponent opened with, however, what I do know is that Doug responded with Davidson for 102 points as a double-double. So I felt Fibbed would be a good ironic play to start off with for the opponent because that is exactly what Doug did in response. He fibbed his opponent by playing Davidson and getting away with it for not just a bingo, but a 100-plus point double-double bingo. This stayed on the board, and you guys guessed it, it is absolutely not a word. Just a fairly common surname, but not valid in Scrabble, so pretty wild stuff here, guys, and a funny example to conclude the video, so Yeah, that about wraps it up for this video, guys. Really hope you enjoyed it and got some good laughs. I do know it was a long wait since the last phonies video, so appreciate you guys' patience and hope this lived up to your expectations. As always, let me know if there are any words that maybe I should have included that I forgot about, or if you have any suggestions for further videos of this kind or any other kind. Really always love hearing your ideas, and yeah, signing off for now, but thanks again so much for your support, guys. Really appreciate it, and I'll see you soon for the next one. Bye-bye.